Hello everyone. My name is Sierra, and you are listening to the Layers Podcast. Welcome in. All right, so I have a thought, and honestly, sometimes I am just like, I wish somebody would have opened my mind up to this. Guys, I did not realize that God likes good things. And I'm going to make it make sense, right? Because all throughout the Bible, we know that God is like, this is good. This, he looks at his work, his creation, and says, it's good. And at the same time, I think I grew up with this mentality that life was only about suffering. And so I just would suffer and oftentimes wouldn't say anything or wouldn't know who to say anything to, and then would be in positions where I'm perpetuating my own suffering. And it wasn't until where I was perpetuating my own suffering, I didn't know. I sincerely did not know. And so one of the beauties about life has been slowing down and realizing that I was trying to move at the pace that I saw everybody else moving at without realizing that there are some areas in my life that need to be addressed. And it took a lot of time. For me, my catalyst, you guys know, it was having an abortion and then moving from there to just becoming awake and alive to life. And I wish it didn't have to get to that point where I was losing something before I was able to have sight and open my eyes to see what life was really about. There were moments where I had inklings, but I didn't have full perspective. And a lot of that was because of the people that I had in my life, or the lack of people that I had in my life, the lack of ability to just open up and be vulnerable and to say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what I'm struggling with. I don't know what to do here. Like, I don't want to leave, but I know I don't want to stay. And, there's just so many different things. And so after that moment, I really took off running towards God wholeheartedly. It was like all of the affections that I had for people, or it was just people, but all of the affections that I had for a person turned towards God. And I didn't realize that that's where it should have been the entire time, but I also didn't understand with clarity what people were talking about when they would say, delight yourself in the Lord. And to an extent, I'm still coming to an understanding of that. One of the things that I have started to learn in my walk and my journey, or throughout my walk and journey, has been that God does not separate himself from humanity, and he doesn't separate himself from, I was going to say he doesn't separate himself from the world, but that's not true. God has like a very distinct understanding of who he is inside of the world, but he is not overcome by the world. And so there's this finite distinction between understanding that God is who he says he is, and he desires to be connected with us as humans. And part of it kind of makes me think back to how I would always hear people say, sin separates us from God. And the truth of the matter is that sin causes this entrapment of shame that makes you think that you are less than or not worthy of being in the presence of God. And I think for God, he looks at that and he's like, I sent my child, my one and only child, my son to die on a cross for you so that you would know that I love you, so that you would know that I have a desire and an affection for you that it goes beyond anything. And I think that is the piece of love where I'm like, oh my, like it just hits my heart every single time. And then you think about the redemption of Jesus, how he got up and he went on to fulfill a greater glory, a greater calling, and having an even greater ministry, where one that never ends, and a constant intercessor, someone that understands the weight of disappointment, understands the weight of sin, understands the weight of guilt, understands the weight of jealousy, and understands that it all stems from this place of not remembering who you are. And that, for me, has always been a turning point of once I got just like a brief glimpse, all I needed was a glimpse to understand that God loves me. I was moving in that direction. But as I was just thinking to myself, I started considering all of the things that I've been through, or maybe even that I've, done in the past, that I thought was good behavior or plausible behavior, and it wasn't. And I didn't realize that it was destructive or destroying me. And especially because of where our culture is right now when it comes to this idea of being isolated or not wanting to be around people, or people just have so many thoughts, but it causes so much disruption with unity. And it reminds me, sometimes growing up reminds me of, how you would be around adults and all you hear from kids sometimes is, I know. And adults would just be like, okay, well, you know everything. And so there's this moment where the adult is like, I don't want to talk to you anymore because everything that I'm giving you, you are responding that you know what to do. And, from the kid's mind, they're just like, I don't want to be told what to do. And so it brings me to this question where I'm like, okay, Lord, well, how do we operate in that? Where we have this idea that we want to be independent, which is not solely bad, but you don't want to live life independent from God. And so living your life independent from God means living your life independent of people. And part of me just wonders, where did this moment in our history happen where people decided that it was better to go by yourself or be alone on the journey versus just telling the truth that people come and people go, and some people are with you forever. Some people are with you to walk you through a certain season. Some people are just there to open the door, but it doesn't mean that you look at them as if they're any less. Jesus, when they were, I want to say it was after he fed the 5,000. Look, I'm going to tell y'all every time, go read your Bible, okay? I know, you might be like, okay, Sierra, but where am I reading? Go to Matthew's. Look at the book of Matthew's. But when they were traveling, a lot of these people that wanted to follow Jesus because they're like, wow, you truly are amazing, they followed him up until a certain point, because the truth got hard. And then they started leaving. But notice, Jesus never spoke negatively about them. He didn't cast shame upon them. He just looked at his disciples like, are you guys going to leave too? And it really just makes you think that the way that you're able to evolve and grow and maneuver in life is to the level that you are able to take in and understand truth. And I think that's part of what being a human is about, that's also part of what science is about, right? The goal is not to control everything and everyone or every outcome, because it's just not possible. But the goal is to become and to evolve into who you are meant to be. And a lot of times, I think growing up, I would find myself looking at these people in different arenas where they had these big and boisterous careers where they were able to do so many things. And I didn't realize that it really takes a level of practice to come into the knowledge of your true self. And you have to be okay with sometimes messing up, but you need to be even more okay with having some people in your life that can talk to you and talk you through things. Now, this always comes with balance. It always comes with balance. You never want to have too many people around you so that you are walking in this place where you feel like you are supposed to please everybody, but you also don't want to be in a position where you are cutting off everybody and you're walking away, turning away from everybody, and not really realizing that these same people that you're turning away from are the very people that you need. I think a lot of times in relationships, women can run into this issue, especially if you're with the wrong man. Any man that promotes discord between you and your family is not the right partner. However, there's such a balance that needs to come, because your partner is supposed to promote truth and value, and they're supposed to be able to stand up for you and know that you're his woman, or, he's your man. And I think that can be such a complicated thing to get right. But nowadays, all I hear is about people turning away from their parents, people turning away from long-standing friendships, and never really investigating, one, is this something that God has purposed? And also, is this something that I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to turn away from them temporarily? Am I supposed to lead my life in such a way where it inspires them or it opens up their mind so that they can see that they also can live their life better and more whole? And then you have to be conscious of the fact that if you are going to do this, and as you do this, you need a partner that is just as dedicated to God and devoted to God as they are to you and your relationship and the growth of it, because those two things don't come without each other. And when I say any man that's promoting problems between you and your family, what I mean is any person that is not necessarily speaking from a place of truth, but they're speaking with the intent to separate. Or they're speaking from a place of jealousy or envy, where, sometimes you have people that will say horrible things like, you're the prettier one, or you're the nicer one, where people try to fill your head a little. They try to gas you up. And you don't realize that in them gassing you up, they are really tearing down someone else. There is no room for that in life. There's no availability for that in life. What really needs to be known across all parties is that my compliment to you will never diminish another person. When I try to offer you a compliment or tell you something that I like about you, it should never come at the expense of somebody else's personality or somebody else's characteristics. Because if I'm talking about you, why are we bringing them up? Why are we talking about them? And this is something that I had to learn in its fullness. I think I've always walked and I've been like, I want to be a nice person, and nice but lacking in truth. So it wasn't kind at its core. But one of the things that I learned just from listening to ungodly people was that when you give a compliment from a place that has to diminish someone else, that person themselves is likely very wounded, but also does not have an understanding of who God is. Because you could be the most attractive person on the planet and still get hate for it. You could be the most unattractive person on the planet and still get hate for it. And so what God often looks at is not what a person says or what they do. He looks at the person as a whole. There was a time, this is when I was, well, yeah, it wasn't holy, guys. I went out with a friend, and there was this girl that we had met, and she was kind of new to the crew, just introduced to her through by happenstance. You meet people and meet other people. And when I tell you, this young lady is absolutely gorgeous. Like, she looks so beautiful. She's so pretty. And at the time, I had a friend that would often that is also beautiful, but would often make remarks about her, whether it was about her life or about what she had heard through the grapevine, or about just negative things to kind of pull this person, in a way, to try to pull this person down. And I don't know if she ever knew, so thank the Lord, but she was so graceful. And the more that I got to know her and sit and talk with her, I was like, wow, you have like so much to offer the world. I don't think that there's a person you'll meet that doesn't have to offer the world, but she was so much more than what she looked like or what she appeared to be, so much more than the things that I had heard people say about her. And I'm just like, it made me think that, one, your beauty does not mean that you are going to be treated well or acknowledged or accepted by other people. And a lot of times whenever people are spewing that, it's because of a personal discomfort within their own selves. And I don't think men do this. So I wonder to myself, like, why do women do this? Why would you do that? But it comes from a place of jealousy. And then that's hard to hear, is that, oh my goodness, this person might be jealous of me. Or I might be a jealous person. I am not speaking that over anybody. I'm not speaking that over myself. But I think that there are moments where people balance incorrectly how they perceive people. And, because this person looks like this, that means that they act like this, right? So I just have come to learn that there is more to life than the standards that we have placed upon ourselves. But also, what you see as beautiful is understood more and more through truth. And your ability to see yourself rightly and to live your life well comes at the level that you can handle truth, and that you can walk in humility, being humble enough to hear from somebody that will say, hey, I love you and you did that wrong. And it might not always come out like that, okay? But if it doesn't come out like that, that's also a moment for your patience to be tested, and a moment for you to look at what does that bring up inside of you. I know growing up, I would always hear my mom say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so I very much became this person where if I was going to say something, I wanted to make sure it was sweet and kind and nice. And then if I felt like I wasn't being heard, at a moment, I would become like this monstrous person. And I felt like I had the right to do so. But what I've begun to learn in my walk with Christ is that he's like, no, you don't have the right to do that because you are tearing people up. And so that made me really look at the way that I spoke to people or how I would respond in moments where I was maybe being disrespected or someone, maybe their goal was to correct something that I was doing, but the way that they said it was not kind, nor was it in a loving way. It was like they were irritated or something like that. And how God has begun shaping me is like, what is your ability to navigate those situations where you can hear what somebody says and you can pull out maybe the pieces of it that maybe you do need to work on, or maybe that you do need to address, and then what is your ability to throw the rest of it away and not to take it personally. I think that's also a golden rule in romantic relationships, because I can't think of how many times there would be moments where I'm like, didn't I say this last week, or didn't I just say that? And you notice that if you are patient with a person over time, they'll be able to get it. And if not, some things are grounds for termination. But just understanding that respect is so much more than telling someone that you respect them or presenting yourself as if you're an honorable person, but then behind closed doors, do you back it up? And this shows up in how you speak to a person. And then there's the flip side of it where you start to realize that sometimes when people are speaking to you cruelly, a lot of times it's how they speak to themselves. And every time that I hear that, every time that I take that in, I'm just like, oh, now my heart hurts. And so it makes it so much easier to respond in kindness, because you realize that people typically put out whatever they've taken in. Not always, because there is a place that you will get to in life where you can hear something and it bounces off of you. Kind of like the Bible talks about, wearing the full armor. That's what that looks like. There is this person that I used to work with, and she was the most happy and thoughtful, kind, and approachable person that I've ever worked with. Always. That was always her attitude. That was always her approach. Even when she was working with her clients, and they would have big behaviors, she still remained calm and neutral, and she just always had this presence about her. And she got so much flack. I don't know if she knew it. Sometimes, this is a side note, but sometimes God is gracious enough to not let you hear what people are saying about you behind your back, because it really doesn't matter. And then you're still able to just move so freely and casually because you still show up as yourself. And truthfully, you have no idea what people are saying about you. I hope that she didn't know. The problem is, why did I know and not say anything about it? But, either way, I've grown since then. But people would always say the most cruel things because she was so positive and because she just had this attitude of pleasantry. She was always pleasant, always willing, always, she just was a pleasant person. And people would be like, that's fake. That's not real. You can't be that happy. Why are you always smiling? And now looking back at it, I'm like, why don't you smile more? What is wrong with you? You know, one of my sayings at work for a while is when I heard people saying things that were rude or had a little bit of an attitude with it, I would just look at them and ask them. I'd be like, are you being nice? Are, are you being kind? Is what you're saying necessary? And that has really just become one of those things where one, am able to navigate situations where I hear people gossiping or saying things that are just ungodly that I don't want to be around, or to mute a conversation, because genuinely in my soul, I cannot stand mean people. I don't like it. But I also understand that if a person is behaving in this manner, something has happened. There is a story about them or to them that I don't know anything about. And that is just honestly one of the benefits of that I had while working in ABA, is you start to realize that behavior doesn't just happen out of nowhere, you know? And the goal is to start to reframe some things. And then it's also taught me to be patient with myself, because there have definitely been moments in my own life where I look back and I'm like, why did I do that? Or why did I say that? And I would get so hard on myself. But the truth is, there is more to me than, just who I try to present myself as. I am a woman that has experienced some really difficult things in life, and by the grace of God, I am still standing to be able to talk about it and to be able to be open about it, but also to coming to the point of vulnerability where I could just let some of it go, all of it. Actually, I'm gonna let it all go because I don't want it. But you just start to shed off, different layers of yourself, and you realize that there is so much more to life than being bogged down with the comments and the thoughts or the rejections of others. Does rejection hurt? Yes. And if you're a people person, oh my goodness. You're like, why don't they like me? But you just start to understand that there is a level of understanding that not everybody in this life is going to like you, and that's okay. Don't change who you are to get them to try to like you, or to try to force them into submission of understanding that you are worthy. You don't have to force anybody to see it. If they don't see it or they don't treat you as that, be okay with walking away. Be okay with having to turn away from some things that maybe you never thought you would have to. For me, I learned that lesson, and it is a practice that I will keep for the rest of my life. But the goal is also to make sure that when you leave a place, you leave well. And that can be in work environments, in friendships, in, I don't know, whatever it is in life that you have to separate from, because sometimes you just realize this no longer serves me, or I've grown beyond this. And that, for me, brings a breath of fresh air and hope and perseverance, just understanding that in every phase of life, every area of life, you will change, you will grow, you will build and become an entirely new person. And if you are open to that, it will be the greatest decision that you've ever made. Just choosing to walk with God in that way of understanding that you don't know everything, but if you allow Him, He will bring you to a place of truth about yourself. And it's gonna take some work. I don't know where this piece of not taking work came from. I used to be one of those people that believed it, but when I say it's going to take some work, it is not always going to look pretty. It means that you are going to have to budget. It means that you are going to have to do a lot of these things that, you've heard people say, and maybe you didn't have an understanding about it because nobody taught you that when faith walks in the room, so does a plan, so does partnership, so does intentionality. And when the Bible says, write the vision, make it plain, and make it so that he who actually, let me actually read that one. Okay, I'm going to read this from the NIV version, but it says, the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come, and will not delay. And when I hear that, or when I think about that, I think about once you write something, you don't just go and pray over it and, expect things to fall into place. Things will naturally fall into place, but you have to be willing to walk out some areas of your life. And I, for a long time, didn't understand that, and I didn't understand that God comes and moves through the plan and the process. And a lot of times that was something that for me was misleading in what I would hear people preach, because I didn't hear the process of it. I would hear how they went from struggle to greatness, but I never heard anything about the middle or about the in-between. I'd hear, we got married and then we've been married for 55 years. And I think that's one of the areas in this social media digital age that sometimes we miss, because we have so many sound bites, and a lot of those sound bites are filled with, good information, it sounds like, but then you're like, if you're like me, I need context and I want to understand the fullness of a thing. And so to just go off of a piece of what somebody's saying doesn't provide me with enough substance to be able to understand that there was a process for this person to go from point A to point B and then to point C and to D. Like, there was an entire process in between every single one of those letters. And I think once you get out of a certain area in life, it can become so much easier to talk about it, because you're just like, oof. And then, maybe you see how God moved, but you forget that the rawness of the encounter, or the rawness of what happened in your life, is the thing that lets people know I am not alone. And it's the thing that lets people know, oh, you went through that too? Wow, that means I can make it out of this too. While your process might not look the exact same, you know that there will be a process, but if you want to, you can come out. And so for me, every time somebody shares their testimony, I'm like, thank you. Especially while I'm in the middle of it, I'm like, thank you. I didn't know I needed that. And I want to be very intentional about sharing my own, because it has just been a very raw experience, and I think it would do a disservice to God for me to not open my mouth and to speak. And this is just so that, there's many other people on this planet that listen and follow and then create. And I am just one of many people. And so my hope is always that when people listen, that you hear God, and that you see process, and you see the ways that God is able to work or to move or maneuver, or how he can take this very horrible decision that you made and make it something that is the catalyst for how he chooses to use you in this life. And everybody doesn't have to do it on a platform. It does not have to be done publicly. You can do it at work. There are times where you might meet somebody and you might look at them and you're like, I don't know what it is, but they just seem down today, or they just seem off today. And if you have the wisdom of God, He will tell you and show you and guide you. Maybe that person needs a hug. Maybe they just need to hear, like, I used to mess up right here, and this is how somebody taught me to do it. You can try it that way if you want, and let me know how it works. Like, to just be humble enough to share yourself with the world, because we need you. And your life is such a gift. And it reminds me, back to our original topic, but of how there are some things that we've been doing and saying throughout our lives, or acting out in our lives, that we've been calling normal, but God is like, I don't like that. I don't like abuse. I don't like the fact that you don't know how to talk to anybody, or that you feel justified to scream at them and then hurt them and wound them, even though they did it to you first. I don't like that, because once you have knowledge and once you have wisdom, you understand that anytime you have acted out or done something outside of maybe who you genuinely are, or stepped outside of your character, or gotten upset, you start to realize that when you did those things, it was because something happened. Something triggered you, or maybe it took you back to a place, or anytime that you did that, you realize, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm so apologetic, and then you want grace and mercy for yourself, but do you extend it? And that has been, a process, because sometimes when people are pushing buttons, that can be hard. Because it's just like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? Or what am I supposed to say? And the truth is, you just be honest, and you just tell them, hey, what you're doing is hurting me, and I don't like it, and I don't appreciate it. And then if you need to, separate yourself. I'm saying that because that's how I would talk to the kids, when they would get upset. I think working in ABA, you just hear people say all the time, you could just and you're like going through these prompts, and you're telling them, like, you can just say, I don't like that, or no thank you, but you're teaching the skill of self-defense, of how to tell somebody, no, you cannot cross this line, or no, I don't want you to say this, or no, you can't talk to me like that. And then you have to understand that you don't have control over people's actions or decisions, but you can 110% control how you respond to what they've said or what they've done. Your response is fully you, and that's the one thing about living this life, is just remembering that you can only control you. You might have influence in other areas, you might have these abilities to shift and change, but you can never control another person. And it shouldn't be your desire to, because God has never sought to control us. And we see all the time where people choose their own choices and make their own decisions. And regardless of how it comes out, that was their choice. And so while they might have been led wrong or steered wrong, it is your responsibility to take accountability for your own choices. And I think once you get to a certain age, once you get to a certain point in life, your goal is to choose correctly. Your goal is to choose in a way that aligns with who you are. And remember that if you are responsible for people that are under you, or people that are either, maybe you're responsible because you're a teacher, or you're responsible because you are a supervisor, or you work in these different capacities, or if you're an influencer, what you put out, you will be responsible for. Because if people start making decisions based on the information that you gave them, and you chose to not give them as many resources and abilities and openness to knowledge as possible, then you run into this problem where you're really leading people astray, and that falls on you. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. So instead of swallowing it, let's choose to be responsible for who we are, so that the people that we are responsible for in our lives, we can then have a better impact and a better advantage at teaching. because my goal is never to control you. My goal is only to do well and be well. And as I do well and I get I was going to be like, as I be well, but as I do well in life, the people that are around you will also start to do better. And if you're responsible for them, you are responsible for them. And so it just makes you more conscious of the way that you respond, even in difficult situations. But all right, thank you guys for tuning in so much and listening to the Layers podcast. This was definitely a compilation of my thoughts, but I just wanted to put it out there that some of the stuff that we have been tolerating in our lives and that we've been calling good, or we just choose to live with it, God is like, I didn't say that, I don't want that. And so my hope is that as you guys listen to this podcast, you go and do some reflecting and look at maybe some of the areas of your life where you yourself aren't necessarily pleased with, and then wonder, God, are you pleased with this? And from there, of course, I'm always going to encourage you guys to do more research and to do more learning, because there's so much information that's out there, and your ability to sift through information should be a priority, but the goal of information should always be to give you a better understanding of yourself and your impact and what you're able to shift and change in this life. But all right, thanks so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next time on the Layers podcast. Bye.